folks. I'm here with a 2011 328 XI, so that's all-wheel drive, xDrive model, E90 four-door. I just picked this up recently from a used car dealer, and naturally they sell these things as is. And I have discovered it's got a power steering leak, as evidenced. So we're going to take care of that. I hadn't seen any videos online about doing that in this model, so I'm going to do some shade tree mechanic type stuff.
All right, couple of notes since I finished yesterday. I just wanted to let whoever's going to attempt this know essentially the tool list you're going to need. Obviously, basic ratchet set. Um, so you need a small one, a 1/4 inch drive, a 3/8 drive, um, and that'll get you through most of it. You'll also need a torque wrench, like I said. Um, when you get to the part where you're trying to remove and then obviously to reapply the high pressure hose, you're going to need a flat wrench, preferably a ratcheting wrench because there's just no space in there. So if you have a 10 millimeter uh, wrench with an angled head, you'll be really good. You'll see when I use that to remove and reinstall the bolt that holds in the high pressure hose. You'll also need um, one of these guys. This is I don't really know the appropriate term for this, but it's like an angled extension um, for your ratchet that allows you to get at the awkward angle for the high pressure hose where it connects into the power steering pump. You'll also need a 22 millimeter socket for that and a 19 millimeter socket for the smaller one. 19s you probably have, 22 you might have to go buy. Um, and I think that covers it. So just make sure you got all those parts before you get started, um, or you'll have a trip in your future. One last thing. Most ratchet sets come with extensions, so you'll have one probably for your 1/4 inch and your 3/8 drive. You'll probably want to have those things on hand. I think at least one of them is necessary. And depending on what size torque wrench you have, it could be really awkward trying to get to some parts with various sizes. So you might want a set of those plugs to change the sizes up and down on the torque wrench, depending on what you need size wise. Mine has a 1/2 inch drive, so I had to put the reducer on it for some of the parts or some of the sockets, but that's about it. So after driving the car around and taking a look, get some light on this. Inside the engine bay here, you can see down at the bottom there's a lot of moisture, and it's all sort of situated around this thing here, which is the power steering high pressure hose. So, being reasonably confident that that is the source of my leak, I ordered a replacement, and we're going to go through putting that in. First things first, as we're going to have to lift this car up, so I will sort of document that. I got some reasonably new blacktop here, and these jack stands, they got these 4 feet on them, which would definitely dent, especially this one. Uh, these don't have particularly great feet, and so they would poke into the blacktop. So I'm going to cut some boards to distribute the weight, so we don't put so we don't damage my driveway, putting the weight of the car on these jack stands. So minor trick of the trade here. I don't want to have to drain too much of this nonsense out of the bottom and into my face. So I am going to use an extractor. This is a 500cc extractor with a little tube on the end. You can just stick that right in here and suck. Thing right down on the bottom there. Yep, there we go. Got all that stuff out of there. Set this aside. There we see. Got most of the fluid out of there. A little bit left in the drain, but it's okay. There'll still be plenty to come out when I open the bolts on the banjo bolt, but good enough. A couple things. I'm here at the front of the car getting ready to lift it, and I'm going to show you the central lifting point. It's right underneath the engine. There's this pad here that's intended to lift the car from a central point, so you get a nice, 2-ton jack stand jack, and you can just pick it up right there and then put your jack stands in. Obviously make sure to put stops on the rear wheels before you do that. And then we see a bunch of moisture here because that's where all the fluid's been going naturally. You can see right there how the pad on the hydraulic jack sits neatly on that mount point. Oh, got the car up on the central mount point. Put these jack stands, lined them up underneath here. Those right there are the side mount pads. Figure out the best way to align them, either parallel or perpendicular to the beam, but those are where the mount points are. Depending on the shape of your jack stand's heads, figured out. There's also the rear one back here, basically look the same, and that is where you'll put the car when you jack it up on stands. Just to understand how we deal with the rear of the car, right there is the center rear differential. We're going to put the jack under that, and that's how we're going to lift up the rear of the car so that we can put the jack stands on and have a nice level platform to work on. Down here underneath the car now, And obviously, you see all the wetness. Check that it's all power steering fluid. I've got to remove this panel right here, and there's a bunch of bolts that sort of hold this thing in, going all around the engine and the oil pan. So I got quite a few bolts to pull out, and then we'll be able to get access to the pressure steering hose underneath there. All right, got this thing open. It looks pretty confirmatory that this is the source, but I'll check around and make sure that there isn't anything else going on here. You can see where this connects up to the pump. I'll get into it a bit. These things are connected via a couple banjo bolts, which are magic marvel of engineering, and the replacement part comes with this panel here that holds this thing on. I'll show that in a second. So I don't want to just go with my first biased thoughts about what might be happening here. I'm going to take this piece of paper and check higher up on the hose to see if these fluids have been leaking down here or if they're originating down there. A little dirt, but it's dry. Right? So all of that's coming from down here, and it looks pretty cruddy, so it's pretty obvious what's going on. So here's the replacement part, nice and new. Comes with a bunch of crush washers. You can see it's mounted on these bushings, and it looks like it's only got one bolt that's probably holding that thing in. Over here, you see it's really just a hose. Uninitiated will think, well, how does this connect? It uses a banjo bolt, which is a bolt with a hole in it that'll go sort of straight through here and connected to the car with these crush washers. You got to be careful putting them on, because if you over torque them, you ruin everything. Those bolts have a hole in the center. They're hollow essentially, and the fluids flow through them, so it holds it in place and gets the fluid transfer going. Pretty clever stuff. Engineering is awesome. I took the hose off its mount, and these screws were so bad off that it just sort of peeled off. And I did that because it is really difficult to reach in here. You're really only going to be able to do it if you have either a regular wrench or a ratcheting wrench. There's a 10mm screw that's holding this plate onto this beam in the car, and you got to get that out in order to get the new part in. When you take off this bolt, be careful to keep a finger on it, because I let it slip and it ended up falling behind where it mounts, and I had to take off the casing underneath the oil pan, which is a pain in the butt, but I'm gonna go fish for the bolt. Useful bit of information. This mount sort of sits underneath the sway bar, and you can't really get at it without loosening that thing up. Once you loosen the sway bar, you can get a little space in there, and you can actually take it out and be ready to put the new one in. You only have to take off this one side on the left, and you'll be able to get at it right there. See that? You gotta take that bad boy out, and you can give yourself some leverage and some room to work in there. All right, next bit here. Disconnect the two banjo bolts. One is a 22. You're gonna have to make sure you have one of those because that's kind of large. And the other is a 19. It's the one on the right there, the smaller one. And that'll get the high pressure hose out. Get a pan because even though we emptied it out, there's gonna be some drippage. All right, there goes the banjo bolt off. Couple useful things to note. It's a very awkward angle, so I used a flexible head so I could sort of angle the thing in there. The next bolt, the one that's back there, it's a bit deep. That's the 19 millimeter. So I'm gonna use an extension. And that gets a good connection there. So that's how you do that. All right, just to talk about the new part real quick. You can use the same banjo bolts, but you should have a set of new crush washers. It's looks like copper, so it's pretty soft metal to help plug up that space. And there's going to be very specific torque settings for these things, so you don't mess things up. There's going to be 2 per bolt, right? Because you're going to put one. Sorry, you're gonna put this guy in here, and then there's going to be another washer on the far side. All right, so it's going to look like this, because this is going to be screwed into the pump with the hose in between, hole inside the banjo bolt, and the fluids can flow naturally. So make sure you do that for both bolts. Just to show how awkward getting this thing back on is. That's kind of what we're working with here. See that? Get the wrench on there, and you can kind of just tighten it. It'll be a while. And there you have it. The new part is installed. Make sure you use, like I said, a torque wrench. You want 25 Newton meters on this bolt. That should give you sufficient pressure. There's a washer in there, I think, the old washer. I was looking for that. Yeah, that's the old washer. So you want 25 Newton meters. Make sure you get the old washers out of there. There was actually one, I should have taken a picture of, but there was one that was sort of pancaked on the old, on the banjo bolt. And so I had to like, really pry it off there. It looked like someone stuck it on with a little bit of, I don't know, almost a glue-like substance. Basically, the tops of those banjo bolts are more or less flat. And if you see something sticking up, it's the old washer. They might be some degree of dirty. Scratch it a little bit. Just take a look and make sure that you get the old washers off of there. Then you can get the new ones on, tighten everything up, and you'll be good to go. Obviously, don't forget to refill your power steering fluid. Check your manual or the top of your thing here to sort of identify what kind of fluid you require. This one takes, what is it, CHF 11 or some synthetic alternative. Do that little bit of homework before you fill it back up, and you'll be good to go.